This is the Lockpicking Lawyer, and what I have for you today is another interesting lock from Urban Hawk. It's the Gere model CL1-70. It's a dual custody padlock, meaning you need two different keys to open the single lock. And what makes this lock so interesting is the fact that it takes two keys but only has one keyhole. And I'll show you how that works in just a minute. But before we talk too much about the lock, I wanted to talk about the lock company. Gere is a Malaysian company that mainly sells Chinese manufactured locks and door hardware. In my research into the company, I found an interview with the owner in a Malaysian newspaper in which the owner mentioned that the name of the company, Gere, was selected in honor of American actor Richard Gere. So apparently Richard Gere has a whole line of padlocks and door hardware and probably never knew about it. Okay, let's talk about this particular lock now. First, it is big. It's a full 70 millimeters across, solid brass, and very, very heavy. It's over 2 pounds and is topped off with a hardened 12 millimeter shackle. But the most interesting feature of the lock is the fact that it takes two keys but only has one keyhole. Let me show you how that works. First, we have the key labeled number 2. If we were to insert that, you would find that the core doesn't even move. If you were to insert the key labeled number 1, you'd find that the core moves, but the shackle doesn't open. It's only when you insert key number 2 after priming the lock with key number 1 that the lock will open. And this is done through the use of dual shear lines and a master ring. And if we zoom in and look at this really carefully, you can actually see the master ring down in the bottom of the keyway. And it turns out that the key number 1 shear line is the inner one, and the key number 2 shear line is the outer one. So if we're going to pick this open, we need to pick it twice, and we need to do it to a different shear line each time. For those of you who are familiar with picking dual shear line locks, you know that is a tall order. But before we try to pick it open, there is unfortunately one relatively major flaw with it, and that is that it is shimmable. So let's shim this open. We'll open it the easy way, and then after that, we'll see if we can open it up the hard way. Okay, got one shim in. Now let's get the other one in. And they are not easy to get into place. Let's see. There we go. So there is unfortunately a relatively major security flaw with this lock. However, you're not interested in seeing me shim these locks. You want to see me pick it. So that's what we're going to do. Now, we have to pick first to the number 1 shear line and then to the number 2 shear line. And unfortunately, selecting what shear line you pick to is not easy. I picked this several times before starting this video, and every single time I've picked it only to the number 1 shear line. And that's a problem if we're going to open this lock up. However, there is a security flaw with this lock that allows me to open it to the number 2 shear line, and I'll show you what that is in just a minute. Before we start picking, I'm going to drop a little tension wrench in the bottom of the keyway. The reason I'm doing that is because this is a relatively soft brass lock, and I don't want to damage it with my pick. So, using top of the keyway tension with a 50 thousandths pry bar and a standard hook in 25 thousandths. Okay, 1 is loose, 2 is loose, 3. Okay, little click out of 4, tiny movement on the core. Click out of 5, click out of 6. Back to the beginning, 1 still loose. Click out of 2, nothing on 3, nothing on 4. Click out of 5, nothing on 6, back to 1. Getting a little bit more movement on that core. Click out of 2, click out of 3, nothing on 4, 5 or 6, back to the beginning. I think 1 is set, not quite sure. Click at a 2. Okay, just got a little bit of movement on the core. 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, and you can see the lock opened and we turned it to the number 1 shear line. We know it's the number 1 shear line because we turned the key and the lock didn't open, just like what would happen if we inserted the number 1 key. Now what we need to do is pick it to the number 2 shear line. And unfortunately, I've never been able to do that. However, fortunately for us, Gere has left a security flaw with this lock. If we look very carefully, you can see that master ring down in the bottom of the keyway. And the number 2 shear line is the outer one. And the security flaw is that the outer one is lined up with the outside of the plug here, which means we can shim the number 2 shear line with a thin piece of metal. And I don't think I've ever shown you how that's done before because it's a very, very rare security defect. But basically what you do is take a piece of metal like this, we insert it right at the top of the keyway. And okay, and now it's resting against the front of the first pin. And what I'm going to do is apply some forward pressure to that shim and then just lift up the number 1 pin. And when the shim slides forward, that means that we've reached the shear line. Then, unfortunately, I'm trying to do it to give you a good view, and it's not terribly easy to do and give you a view. So hopefully we'll be able to do both. Okay, here's number 2, number 3, 4, 5, and I think we got caught up on the edge of the cylinder on 5. And that happens when you don't insert the shim perfectly straight. So let me get this back straight. And now number 6. There we go. And we got that shim all the way inserted, which means we should be able to turn this plug and pop the lock open. Let's see what happens. Got it. Okay, so it required a couple of unusual skills to get it to open. However, we were able to pick this lock open. That's all I have for you on this Gere model CL1-70. A really interesting lock and definitely one that I'm very happy to have in my collection. So Urban Hawk, thank you very much for sending it my way. To everyone else, if you have any questions or comments about this lock, please put them below. If you liked this video and would like to see more like it, please subscribe. And as always, have a nice day. Thank you. Folks, one more thing I forgot to mention. Urban Hawk told me that he got some more of these locks and he's going to be putting a few of them on eBay. So I think this is a super cool lock and definitely a rare one in the United States. So if you are interested in getting one for yourself, keep an eye out for that eBay auction. What I'll do is I will ask Urban Hawk to post a link to it in the comments below. And once I see that link, I will pin it to the top of the comments so you can find it easily. Okay, that's it for real this time. Thank you all and have a nice day. Bye-bye.